The book of Revelation reaches its peak with a gruesome ecological event. The final defeat of earthly rebellion concludes with a specific, mandated scavenge. Verse 21 identifies the precise nature of this aftermath, and all the birds were gorged with their flesh. The Koine Greek text describes a state of total, excessive saturation. This scene serves as the cleanup for what the text calls the Great Supper of God. It follows the final destruction of the enemies of heaven. The word gorged introduces a paradox. Divine victory typically implies order, yet this image of excessive gluttony suggests a weight and complexity that complicates the idea of a simple victory. Augustine and Origen interpreted this feast through allegory. They saw the scavenging as the metaphysical annihilation of evil, a symbolic representation of rebellion being absorbed back into the divine narrative. During the Reformation, Calvin and Luther shifted the focus to sovereignty. They presented the bird's satiation as a meticulously executed display of inescapable divine justice. Liberation theology reads this as a structural reversal. The consumption of kings and captains by lowly birds acts as a sky-born critique of earthly tyranny. While these frameworks identify themes of justice and power, they overlook the biological implications of the word gorged. Understanding the full weight of this scene requires us to look past allegory and examine the visceral materiality of the judgment. Medievalist Caroline Walker Bynum's work on Christian materiality highlights that apocalyptic judgment occurs in the reality of sinew, bone, and blood. This is a pyramid of the societal ranks mentioned in the text: kings, captains, the mighty, the free, and the slave. The judgment systematically unmakes these identities. It strips away personhood and ambition, reducing everything to an anonymous, uniform biomass. This anonymous flesh becomes the literal body of judgment, a material substance that the physical world must now process. Every earthly distinction is leveled before God's impartial verdict. This feast begins with a summons from an angel standing in the sun. This is a cosmic decree of absolute authority. The angel commands the birds into a forced metabolic event. Ordinarily, these birds operate within natural ecological cycles. Now they are conscripted into an eschatological drama. Their predatory agency is removed. Their hunger is weaponized, turning them into involuntary acolytes forced to execute the final sentence upon God's enemies. Anthropologist Eduardo Viveiros de Castro offers a framework for this: Cannibal Metaphysics. This diagram represents his concept. Consumption involves incorporating the perspective of the consumed. If consumption transfers perspective, what essence are these birds incorporating? They ingest the essence of damnation, the final, silent scream of rebellion. They become living chalices for the dregs of judgment. This leads to the physical state of being gorged. The birds reach biological saturation, immobilized by the massive quantity and theological weight of what they have consumed. The flesh of the damned acts as an anti-manna. It is a sustenance that suffocates with a density that overloads the host's systems. The birds are grounded and paralyzed by the magnitude of the judgment they processed. They are left exposed and vulnerable to secondary predators. This reveals a material kinetic recoil. When a divine decree of this magnitude is manifested in the material world, the sheer force of the judgment threatens to overwhelm the very instruments called to witness its execution. This scene mirrors Christ's dual role. He is the Word of God commanding the slaughter, and he is also the Lamb. In the Eucharist, the Lamb offers his flesh as a sacrament of life, grace, and willing incorporation into the divine. Revelation 19 presents the horrific inverse. The Great Supper of God is an anti-Eucharist, a sacrament of damnation, where consumption signifies utter destruction. It creates a symmetry of vulnerability. Christ willingly chose vulnerability on the cross for salvation. Here, the birds have vulnerability violently thrust upon them as a consequence of enacting wrath. Revelation 19:21 presents a meditation on the nature of divine power itself. The gorged birds display the potentially self-consuming nature of absolute victory when it is enacted within creation. The triumph of the Word carries a material consequence so overwhelming an indigestible glory, that it strains the fabric of the reality it judges. It forces a reconciliation between the feast of judgment and the feast of grace.